Hello everybody, welcome to this launch webinar for our new report at GEM, diagnosing COVID-19 impacts on entrepreneurship and exploring policy remedies for recovery. And we hope to have an opportunity today to show you some of the learnings from this report, some of the highlights, some of the news headlines. But we also have a bona fide entrepreneur in our midst to ground the discussion, and we're looking forward to having Lisa Larkin on board, who is Director of Duro Mills in Ireland. We also have Anna Tarnawa, who with me was co-editor of the report. She is the head of the Strategy and Analysis Unit at the Polish Agency for Enterprise Development, but is also leading our Polish team. And we have Niels Bosma, who's the Associate Professor and Chair at Utrecht University, a Professor of Entrepreneurship. He has involvement with the UK GEM team, and he is also the Chair of the GEM Board of Directors, and he is also our Senior Research Advisor. So Niels has several hats with which he can talk today. And I am Aileen Ionescu-Summers. I am the Executive Director of GEM and was a co-editor with Anna of the report. And so welcome everybody. I'd like to, just for those who do not know us, introduce GEM just in a minute or two. It's a consortium of national country teams which are associated with a whole range of top academic institutions. And what we do is carry out a survey-based research on entrepreneurship around the world. In fact, you may not know, and now you're going to know, that GEM is the only global research source that collects data on entrepreneurship directly from individual entrepreneurs. And we do that using two main instruments, the Adult Population Survey, which looks at the characteristics, motivations, and ambitions of individuals starting businesses, as well as social attitudes towards entrepreneurship. And we also carry out a national expert survey, which looks at the national context in which individuals start businesses. And we have drawn for this report, we have drawn on the results of those surveys. GEM is really a large initiative worldwide. We have some, you'll have seen from the report, we have some 54 teams that have participated and contributed to the report. We have 21 years of data. We carry out about more than 200,000 interviews a year. We've worked with 115 or so economies. We've got about 500 specialists in entrepreneurship experts that work with us, and we have some 200 or so funding institutions, many of them governments. And so we have a lot of interest from policymakers in the results of GEM research. And one of the reasons that we actually did this report is because we wanted to, let's say, be as relevant as possible in this COVID-19 extraordinary time that we have been going through. And so what we have essentially done in the report is capture the first 6-7 months of this extraordinary time in terms of the impact on entrepreneurs, the reactions of policymakers to the impacts and how they are managing the situation worldwide. And then also looking forward, we have a sense from our teams who are out there on the front lines, if you like. We're looking forward to what are the hope? What's the hope out there for entrepreneurs? What can we expect, and how can we give, using all of our resources here at GEM, how can we give the best possible guide, our guidelines to policymakers for the future? So that's what it's going to be all about today. And what I would like to do in order to ground, as I said, ground the discussion a little, is hear a little bit the story from Lisa of her startup, how it came into being, And then from there, we'll move on to some of the reactions to what has happened in the last, since the beginning of the year. So maybe, Lisa, you can just tell us the story of your startup. Why and how did it come into being?
Hi, Aileen. Yeah, thank you for inviting me here. It's an honour to be speaking here. Well, I suppose just to give a bit of background on how I started my entrepreneurial journey. I have worked as a clinical embryologist in one of Ireland's largest IVF units since 2004. And I suppose the main challenge I found with that over the years is that I was commuting very long distance to my job. So my daily commute in total was about 4.5 hours. And embryology is quite quite a challenging job in terms of it's 7 days a week, you know, nearly 360 days a year. So you have to be constantly working, you know, weekends, day to day. So I started a family, and this was beginning to not work for the family because I was leaving at 5:30 in the morning and home late. So obviously in my area, I live in a rural area, there wasn't much opportunity to work closer. So I started to realize quite quickly that if I want to work locally and be more flexible, I was going to have to maybe start my own business. So that was really the major consideration for me starting up my company. In tandem to that, I had an interest in nutrition because we had experienced issues in our family around like digestive issues around kind of eating wheat and bread. And I came across the products that I'm making now, which are sprouted flours. So basically, they're an easy to digest solution for wheat and other products. And I quite quickly realized that there was a gap in the market for these types of flours. So really, I suppose it just came together then, and it seemed a logical idea to try and start this as my business. So
thank you. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting what you say, because there was a lot of quality of life aspects, and also making the world somewhat a better place, you know, that was involved in your business, right?
Yeah.
Making the world a better place for you, but also making the world a better place. So can you bring us back to when you first heard of the Irish lockdown, and as an entrepreneur with a business that was really promising, because I think it had really taken off, right?
Yeah.
What went through your mind, and how you know, what were your fears? And
well, I suppose initially I was kind of, I suppose you always think, oh, it's happening out of Ireland or in Europe or elsewhere, and it probably won't affect you. But then within a week or two, quite quickly realized that this was actually kind of spreading across the world and could quite definitely have an impact for my business. I suppose realistically, it happened so fast that in terms of planning, I probably didn't do too much, but obviously when it hit here and the lockdown hit, it happened quite quickly, literally overnight. So it was quite challenging because we're still a small business, and literally overnight the business pivoted from, we would supply a lot of food service, and also we have a small bakery, so we don't just supply flour, we supply breads as well. So we lost literally a lot of our business overnight. However, that kind of pivoted in the sense that our retail flours went absolutely through the roof. In particular, our online sales. So generally, like, our turnover was about probably 1% of our turnover was from online sales, and that went to 20% of our turnover just in the lockdown period. And that's with, we actually ended up having to close our online platform for a little while in order for us to try and service the number of orders that came in literally in a space of 2 days. So that was quite a challenge, actually. Our retail orders as well also went through the roof. So customers ordering maybe a few cases of flour suddenly were ordering pallets of flour. So that was a serious challenge in terms of, you know, we had no time to plan to actually increase our production. In turn as well, we had an issue for a few weeks that our grain that we would buy in as a raw material, we faced challenges in the supply chain of that, purely because I suppose flour in particular, I suppose it's a unique business. It went through the roof during the pandemic and the lockdown. So we had issues in actually getting in our raw materials for a few weeks, which
supply issues.
Yeah, so that actually was, we were able to source another supplier, but obviously all of these things take a huge amount of time. And then I suppose personally another challenge we faced here was that suddenly all the schools and childcare facilities shut down as well. So I had the added pressure of trying to suddenly deal with family life, which normally didn't impinge too much on the day-to-day workings, which did have quite an impact.
Yeah.
Trying to figure that out as well in tandem. But
so on that last point, I think our report clearly has identified that women entrepreneurs in particular have been quite hard hit from that point of view, because they have taken the lion's share of the childcare and education issues. Yeah, I'd like to move though to, you know, what you're looking at from a policy perspective, and have you had disappointments, and do you have fears for the future?
Well, overall, I think I suppose I've actually probably been pleasantly surprised in one way by the policies. I think the government did react quite quickly, but I suppose looking across all sectors, I think it was very sectoral on how those policies affected people. Like I'm lucky I'm in the manufacturing industry, so it's been quite good in terms of supports, but I think if you're in a more service-based industry, I think probably you were quite neglected, and still are in Ireland anyway, from that kind of point of view.
So it's been fragmented, in other words, a little bit fragmented. Okay, yeah.
And I think some of the policies brought in had unintended consequences as well. So in particular, one payment brought in, it was an unemployment payment, which was quite generous. And while it was fantastic for people that were overnight found themselves laid off, it particularly impacted on, say, part-time workers, because a lot of part-time workers actually left work because the payment was higher than what they were earning, and it was a blanket payment across the board. So I suppose that's probably just one of the consequences that.
Yeah, looking forward though, what to you would be the ideal kind of synergy or dynamic between policymakers and entrepreneurs?
Well, I think really with making policy for and working with entrepreneurs, I think it maybe is just to recognize that all entrepreneurs may be not working in a very standard business model that would be expected in an established business. I think a lot of entrepreneurs may be, you know, they may not be drawing a wage from the business, even though, or they might be drawing back loans from the business that they have put in. So when it comes to looking at, say, supports based on your income, it may not be accurately reflected on how you're working. You may also be relying a lot on, you know, kind of sales, or maybe your pre-sale as well. So you don't have a track record with banks on accessing credit or funding because you're still just getting off the ground. So I think it's just to recognize that maybe businesses are, you know, in a different stage to what you may think when you think of a functioning business.
Yes, yeah, and one size fits all solutions are problematic in that respect, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what I'm going to do now is bring in Niels and Anna. But first I want to do something if you, Lisa, were to choose one word to describe the last 8 months, what would that word be, and why? Just in one sentence. And I can ask the same question of Niels and Anna.
Well, I probably would have to say it's been an absolute roller coaster.
Roller coaster, yes.
So there's been definite absolute highs and then absolute lows, and it's been very interesting and very challenging, but overall, you know, we're starting to come out the other side, I think. So
you're on the up of the roller coaster.
Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully you're going that. Hopefully we're going that way.
Yeah.
Niels, what's your word?
Okay, well, you give me some time to think about it. Yeah, it's difficult. One word doesn't cut it, I would say, but I would go for resilience. I think because it does acknowledge that yeah, we've had a terrible situation and it's impacted many lives. But at the same time, I think we also saw the response by individuals, but also by collectives and organizations, and how they could actually deal with this difficult situation. So I saw that at my university, but I think many people saw that in their own environment as well. So yeah, I would go with that word.
And Anna, what would be your word?
Yeah, that's very difficult question, especially that our report provides so much details about the situation. But I would say that it was a shock and a sort of you know, time where we were frozen somehow, frozen or even paralyzed in a way that no one knew what could happen and how the governments would react and when and whether the help would be available or not. And also that fear that was present among like each of us was crucial to my opinion. Yeah.
Okay, so roller coaster, resilience, and shock. Okay, thank you. And Niels, I'll actually move to you now. In your view, what value does this report that we're launching this week bring to, you know, a range of our stakeholders, experts in entrepreneurship, policymakers, and entrepreneurs in general? I'll leave it to you to choose who you start with.
Well, for one thing, obviously, I think it's a very timely report. We're in the middle of the crisis still, and we're still seeking our way out. So in that sense, I think we can learn a lot from each other when we look at different responses in different countries. Yeah, talking about experts in entrepreneurship. So I think the report shows a lot of examples, not just in terms of policy, but also in terms of initiatives that have been developed. Yeah. So this is something that I think is important for the experts in entrepreneurship. It also shows how they may connect to other stakeholders in the entrepreneurial ecosystem, so that they can develop new initiatives together. So I hope this report will actually bring benefit to them. For policymakers, I think it's very clear. There's a set of very interesting country summary sheets, so we can actually have a quick overview in what country, what kind of impact it has had, the COVID pandemic has had, and what kind of responses we've seen so far, and maybe also which responses are still to be expected. So also here, I think that this brings a lot of knowledge and that can be shared across countries. Yeah, and for entrepreneurs, I think you also mentioned that. I think it's just inspiration as well. You will see a lot of cases, so that might also inspire you to do something different, to also pivot like Lisa did, and maybe also work together with some of the actors in your local ecosystem.
Thank you. Actually, you were a co-writer with Mark Hart from the UK of one of the chapters in the report, and what you both did were you zoomed in on the COVID-19 impact on in particular, the UK economy, which, as we speak, is still very much in movement. Can you talk about the principle insights from your chapter in terms of the take-home value for other people from other countries that might be listening in to us today?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so I did prepare some slides, not too many, so people can be comforted about that. Yeah, I do want to give credit to Mark Hart from the Aston Business School and his team also from the Enterprise Research Center, who did a lot of work also in collecting all the information. So definitely this is a joint effort, and the UK part is really driven by that team. So I would like to start, and that's in the next sheet, with some general impacts that we've observed also from previous crises. So how does a crisis impact entrepreneurship? I omitted the increase in the number of exits because that's an obvious thing, which we've also seen now, and which we will also see in the near future. But in terms of starting a business, what we see during crisis a lot is delaying and abandoning startups that may have been planned or that were actively undertaken. So this is something that can be a big concern if this period takes too long, because at some point you need new fuel in your economy, and this is brought about by new startups. So this is a kind of a negative impact on new startups. On the other hand, people who are laid off and lose their jobs, they might see no other opportunity than to start a business. And we also tend to see a lot of necessity-based entrepreneurship. This is contingent on the welfare system, right? If you have a good welfare system and you have a good unemployment benefit in place, then necessity entrepreneurship is seen a bit less than in other situations. What we also see is obviously a decrease in perceived opportunities by people to start new business in general. But also here we have to make a distinction because this mostly relates to the activities that we already know, also from the pre-crisis. On the other hand, there's also new opportunities arising from the crisis. We see that with narratives from entrepreneurs. We see the opportunities that Lisa has also perceived and pursued actually. So this is also certainly an important effect that we see in the crisis. So then it's up to also policymakers and other supporters to stimulate these entrepreneurial talents so that they can actually pursue their ideas.
Okay.
So if we can move to the next slide, I can talk a little bit more about what we actually saw in the UK. Because, well, GEM collects data, Aileen, as you already mentioned, for about 20 years. So the nice thing is that we can show developments over time on several indicators on entrepreneurship. These are just 3 indicators that GEM provides. But looking at the crisis in 2008, 2009, we see, for example, that perceived opportunities has really dropped tremendously in that period, which is an obvious observation. We also saw that entrepreneurial intention slightly diminished, and then it took up again 2 years afterwards. But what we also saw is that necessity entrepreneurship actually increased in the UK, and this went alongside a decrease in the total number of startups that was also observed in the national statistics. So, yeah, the general responses that I showed before is something that is also reflected in the UK. Mm-hmm. Now, if we move on to the current crisis, obviously, and this is also mentioned before, in the COVID pandemic, we have to do with social distancing. So we also see sectors that are particularly affected because of the social distancing. So we think about indeed the service sector, the cultural sector has been affected a lot. So we do see very more pronounced sectoral differences because of this particular crisis. Now, if we move on to the next slide, I think it's in the previous slides. Anyway, I wanted to tell you a little bit more on the UK responses. What we've seen in the UK in terms of policy responses to the COVID pandemic is very similar to a lot of countries. The initial response was basically huge relief packages to ensure that people with a job who weren't able to work anymore within that setting were compensated, but also some loan schemes. So that was the instant relief. It is, like I said, something that we've seen in many countries. There was a problem there that many self-employed were actually not eligible for the scheme in the beginning. So it also signaled that there was a lack of understanding how the economy worked and yeah, what kind of role entrepreneurs and self-employed actually play in the economy. That had been fixed later on. But this is also something that came to the fore. Yeah, another thing is what is important also now in August, new schemes have been developed, also to reward businesses that are able to retain their employees, for example, but also to stimulate young people who actually need to get onto the labor market and have difficulties. So to support them with new opportunities. So these are now in place. At the same time, the time horizon in the UK of the proposed measure is relatively short, only a few months from now. So this gives a lot of uncertainty at the moment. So in the UK, the entrepreneurs are really keen on seeing a more longer term perspective, which gives them more certainty. Obviously, also the Brexit situation is only adding to this. So this is something that is really typical to the UK responses. So if we go to the conclusions, that is already up for a while. I think this is a general conclusion that we have both from what we know from the past crisis, as well as the information that we have right now on the UK. So far, we've seen a lot of focus on job retention, but now it's really also time to acknowledge the importance of new entrepreneurial initiatives. After all, these will give the jobs of the future. And in the meantime, maybe also attention needs to be paid to how people can make the transition to the new types of jobs that we may see in the future. But this is an important issue to make the transfer between these two types of policies, to also identify that new entrepreneurial initiatives need to be stimulated. It's also key to provide a long-term perspective. Entrepreneurs are willing to take risks, but are better able to take these risks if the overall uncertainty is diminished. I think most entrepreneurs can only agree with that. So this is a role, I think, of the policymakers to at least be clear about what the situation will be like, if possible for the next year or so, to give a little bit better idea of what the time horizon will be like. And the third item is really to cater to these ambitious entrepreneurs that want to innovate, want to connect to the challenges that are surfacing right now, and help create an environment in which you at least can breed these entrepreneurs. Indeed, it's very difficult to make a policy that applies to everyone, but the best thing governments can then do is really to create an enabling system in which you can expect more ambitious entrepreneurs that will also pursue the activities that as a policymaker you would like to see. So in the future, this could also really relate to sustainability, social impact, etc., etc. So these are the main conclusions of our chapter. Obviously, there's a lot of information inside, and I would also recommend to look at the other country exhibits.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Niels. I mean, would you say that those, in the conclusion, those points express your greatest wishes as an entrepreneurship researcher, taking into account the pandemic that we are currently going through? Or is there anything else that you'd like to add from the point of view of a researcher?
Yeah, well, as a researcher, well, I think what it also shows is how important it is to collect data like we do in GEM on an annual basis, so that you can actually see the developments across countries and compare that to the policy measures that have been taken and other institutional characteristics. So I think this only shows how important it is to keep doing this. So that's one thing that I would like to say here. yeah, also it is a very interesting time, obviously, to see how during a period of crisis, how well, I mentioned the word resilience, how this works in practice, and how entrepreneurs go about this. And here I would actually also say that we should look at a broader view on entrepreneurship, and then I really mean entrepreneurial behavior in a broader sense. So not only by business owners, but also entrepreneurial behavior by, as we've seen with the hospital staff, government officials, many more people involved. Even academics have been very entrepreneurial in the past few months. So I think that this should be more acknowledged, and consequently also should lead to a better appreciation of the role of entrepreneurial behavior in economics and policy. So this is what I hope as well.
Okay, very interesting. I mean, I'm going to turn to Anna now. Anna, you also have several hats, you know, head of the GEM Poland team. Also, you're working with the Polish Agency for Enterprise Development. So I'm going to ask you to sort of put yourself in the shoes of the policymaker here. So in reading the report, is there anything that would surprise you from the findings, and what are the top line learnings that you feel are most relevant?
Well, there are many, I have to say. We don't have much time, but I will just point to a few. So the first one, and it's really, it was a surprise, because even I could hear or read in media or on the internet how many cases and how many deaths are everywhere. Still, I would say our report is full of unimaginable numbers. And if you could, if anyone were to read a few chapters, you would notice that, for example, in Canada, our authors are underlying that the public deficit, which is the result of COVID pandemic, would equal spending that Canada had to afford after the Second World War. Also, in Italy, the authors underline that the sort of economic activity that is needed to bring the economy back to the normal path is actually the same that was expected after the Second World War. So we used to compare COVID pandemic to financial crisis that actually was present in 2009. But from our report, you can even find numbers that now prove that it's something that had never happened actually, and it's actually being compared to the Second World War. So that's numbers. Another thing that surprised me is actually the speed of changes. It's not only the fact that the pandemic hit every 54 economies that are presented in our report. We know that it hit like almost every economy in the world. But the entrepreneurs and also society, you could find examples in our publication how they actually changed their behavior. So first, almost all governments, because it's not a sort of equal in every economy, the reaction was fairly quick. And the sort of a variety of measures and programs that were made available were sort of similar, and they were made available to entrepreneurs and also to the self-employed. There are differences between economies, so they can be identified in our report, and that's the beauty of it. But also, for example, you can read that, for example, in Australia, regional governments started to work with entrepreneurs hubs and to sort of design IoT-based solutions, how to cope with COVID problems. And there are like other examples, for example, in Japan, where usually small and medium-sized enterprises, even those who were sort of, well established, they had problems before the COVID, to find employees on the market, because everyone who finished university wanted to work in the large company. Suddenly, the situation has changed, and all of these graduates are very happy to work in SMEs. So that's sort of change that is actually taking place now, and we will see how economies and societies change as a result of that. And there are a few more. Another one is that, you know, our report shows the variety of economies, and you can find economies like Latin America, where there is a lot of informal economy. And for example, in Mexico, the authors underline that the country was expected to be hit the most heavily among all economies in the world because of the informal economy. Half of the employees are employed in the informal economy. So you can imagine how hard it was for them. On the other,
meaning, sorry, just to clarify, meaning informal means non-registered business, operating exactly outside of the system. Yeah, just to clarify for anyone not clear. Yeah.
Also, what was underlined in case of Chile, that that economy, you know, had gone through actually 3 shocks, and the last one was actually experienced in the last quarter of 2019. So they were recovering after social uprisals, and suddenly the COVID came. So the government was not ready to offer like any extra money at the beginning, and suddenly, you know, it was hit like again. But sort of social attitude, a national campaign which was called Chile for Chile, and solidarity among different agents in the ecosystem somehow works, and the country could, you know, slowly recover. And that's you know, something that I wouldn't know if I you know, couldn't read our report, and that's great. Also, young people in the article, you know, written by our Thai and Japanese authors, it's been underlined that it might be a lost generation if nothing is done in that respect. Why? Because young people who are, you know, finishing their universities, graduating, usually either start their own business activity, which was hit by the COVID on one side, and another, they are first to be laid off somehow, and they are unemployed. The level of unemployment is very high among young people. So that's more or less, if I answered your questions. There were a few more, but I will stop here.
So I do have one thing that I want to raise with you, but before I do that, just like to mention to everyone that we would like to handle some questions at the end, and the panelists are very willing to do that. So if you could put any questions that you might have in the Q&A part, we'll try and field some of those questions in the last 10-15 minutes or so. But Anna, one of the products of GEM, in fact, the most important product that we have, is the GEM Global Report that is produced every year. And what we've tried to do this year, so as opposed to this policy impact report, which is based on qualitative data mostly, obviously not the graphics that Neil showed, but a lot of the information in there is based on qualitative data. The global report is mostly, not only, but mostly focused on the hard data that we collect, that we've all been referring to. And this year, what we've tried to do is make COVID-19 relevant questions, and the global report will be available in the beginning of 2021. But as a policymaker, when you're thinking of the changes we've made and what we can expect from that global report, What do you think a policymaker might be asking him or herself that will be answered by the GEM Global Report once we have it?
Answering as a policymaker, so the first answer is that policymakers are always interested whether the support they are offering is working. And we have asked that question, and we would have the answer. So we would be able to compare how many people who are engaged in entrepreneurship actually received public support, and how many are happy with the support that they were given. Yeah, so that's like one answer. But I cannot stop being a sort of a person who is a researcher and who is very much interested in the processes and entrepreneurship. And our hard data provide a lot of information, and we would be able to observe, for example, whether people minds, approaches have changed because of COVID. Because we have the indicator that measures how entrepreneurial are people in given economy, and we will be able to see whether something has changed or not. Also, what is important, we would be able to trace what were the reasons why people exited their businesses, and one of them is COVID, for sure. We would also observe whether the numbers of those who are engaged in early stage entrepreneurship and established businesses have changed. How much that shock affected entrepreneurial activity. Because from the past experience, from the financial crisis and other crises, we know that it usually affects the entrepreneurial activity, and it has lasting effects at least 2 years. So we would be able to see how much it has changed. We also compare female entrepreneurship and male entrepreneurship. And we know, like from media, that somehow COVID affects more women than men. And we would be able to see whether in numbers we see any differences. Also, what is to me as a policymaker very important is that variable that measures how many of those who actually see business opportunities in their neighborhood don't start companies because they simply fear that they would not succeed. And this is fear of failure. And that indicator, basing on the history of different crises which are described in our publication, usually rises in the crisis like COVID, and this is actually the thing that policymakers can deal with, because they can introduce policies that help those who actually didn't succeed to re-establish or start another business. And this is very important, as from research and cases of different entrepreneurs, we know that those who have started and even didn't succeed, usually they are more probable to succeed next time. So that indicator is as well very important. There are others, but we are short on time, I think.
I'd like to just address one last question, because of course Lisa and Niels have pointed to some ideal ways in which policymakers can enable entrepreneurs. But what do you think might be the main barriers to these scenarios taking shape, and how can those barriers be overcome, do you think?
Yeah, that's again a complex question, because there are obvious barriers like second lockdown, which actually to be imposed on Israel on Friday, and it's going to last 3 weeks. And yeah, so it's like second wave. every government at the moment is sort of, telling, saying, and trying to, say that everything is under control. And that's, I agree that, with lockdown was actually necessary to buy time and to prepare, hospitals and, all these health services and people and teach people how they should behave. But second, lockdown might be a barrier. Another thing is that how we people, customers, would behave. We have observed the shift that people stopped buying unnecessary products like clothing, for example. So whether we would come back to spending on such unnecessary clothing or not. But such barriers are sort of related to a problem that we are observing. But I have to underline that we have provided in our report so-called crisp rules, and among them there are a few that I would like to mention. First is collaboration and cooperation. You will find examples, as I said, in our report of examples of how governments actually cooperate with entrepreneurs and academics, and how it actually brings fruits that otherwise would not be possible. We also have such experience in my agency, and all the programs that are designed in that way work better simply. Yeah, so that's collaboration and cooperation. Another thing is what is the same what Niels underlined. It has to be a clear communication and sort of long-term thinking in the public policy. So that the entrepreneurs nowadays, everything is uncertain, and what we all need is feeling the stability again. So making everything and informing in advance about new changes that are going to be imposed, not to make everyone being shocked again by some action. Also, all the projects that are so-called social innovation or doing in partnership between public policy and private sector are very much appreciated, and they are awaited. A lot of authors are underlying that they are expecting new types of entrepreneurs being present on the market after COVID. Those who would be interested in solving the problems of climate change, inequalities, etc., etc. And what is also very much demanded by entrepreneurs: simple rules, simple sort of programs that are made available. That we wouldn't have such a case. I don't remember the economy now, but one of the authors underlined that 30% of entrepreneurs in this economy were not aware that any sort of public support was made available. So they are not seeking public support. So yeah, it has to be made available, communicated, and policymakers should be a partner, like equal partner to to business people, and through that it would work. And what is essential is knowledge. Without knowledge, without hard data, without also experience from entrepreneurs, public policy is not usually is not ideal.
Thank you. That was a really great and very comprehensive response. I have a few questions, so I'm going to actually mention a few here. So the question from Guy Harris: do you find big differences across geographic location, and any insights on Africa and South Africa? Actually, you will find that there is a zoom in on South Africa in part 3 of the report, so do feel free to have a look at that. But do you find big differences across geographic location? Maybe Niels, you'd like to comment on that? Oh, we don't hear you, Niels.
Unmute. Yeah,
Okay.
I can comment on this in so far that well, we see a lot of differences anyway in terms of entrepreneurial profiles and the type and the size of entrepreneurship in each country. So that has been documented by the GEM reports already for years. Obviously, there's also differences in policy and policy responses. But I do think that Anna already highlighted a lot of those.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely there's big differences even between countries that are quite close to each other.
And we have specifically about the UK, Andrew Henley is asking, the emerging evidence for the UK is that exits from entrepreneurship or self-employment have been highest amongst early stage entrepreneurs because of their ineligibility for government financial support. This is hardly surprising, but has the experience been the same in other countries? Are there other more successful examples of where early stage entrepreneurs have been supported widely? I mean, yeah.
Yeah, so I can at least say something about the Dutch situation because I'm from the Netherlands. So I think we had the same problem in the very beginning, but quite soon it was actually recognized that this group, especially the self-employed without personnel, the independent professionals, were not eligible for support. That also was the case for businesses that have been started up, say in 2019 and were growing fast. But they were only eligible for support if they could actually show that they would lose employees, but that doesn't happen if you grow. Still, you've made a lot of investments, so they were not eligible as well. So quite quickly, some measures have been taken to actually also allow self-employed without personnel to be funded if their income would drop below the minimum wage, basically. So that there are some measures have been taken there. Still, this is still a group that is very much affected, to be clear about that. And also we see obviously that also for the bigger firms now that the big relief packages of the beginning, they're phasing out basically. So I'm afraid we can see that in the next few months we will see a lot of businesses that actually have to release employees in quite high numbers. So that this is something that we also still can expect.
If I could just add from Switzerland, because that's where I sit at the moment. In Switzerland, the support for early stage entrepreneurs hasn't been, in terms of security, been very strong in Switzerland. And I think what COVID-19 did is it actually made the Confederation realize that some support has to be provided for these entrepreneurs. And they actually came in with that quite early and saved a lot of businesses. Now, whether those businesses were viable and will continue into the future, that's another question, of course, as the phasing out of the supports is happening in the next few weeks and months. But it's interesting. It may actually mean that entrepreneurs may start to have another profile in Switzerland, at least politically speaking. We have one more question here. Is there anything to radically change in the post-COVID entrepreneurial policies by governments relative to our GEM established entrepreneurial framework? Or does it just underline the framework and its relevant elements? Maybe you'd like to handle that one, Anna.
Oh yeah, what can I say? Our entrepreneurial conditions is how they are called. They are sort of tracing two aspects and of public support. We are asking whether public programs are available and whether they are made available to young and growing companies, and also about efficiency of them. We have that question. So. But the answer to that question is difficult because on one side I can say yes, we are sort of monitoring how the public policy in terms of regulations and again in terms of measures and programs how it affects entrepreneurship, and we would have the answer after this cycle of our surveys. On the other hand, post-COVID entrepreneurial policies are still unknown. They are sort of, we know the sort of, examples, for example, from our Poland perspective. Our government is introducing a tax relief that would help entrepreneurs to, introduce robotics in their processes. So once they did such thing, they would be allowed to tax relief. So I can expect that in that, providing that there is no second lockdown, public policy would be more oriented into development of entrepreneurs, growth, to sort of showing entrepreneurs which way they should go in order to grow, and that's my opinion. If the sort of pandemic and the problems are still with us, but not in the whole economy, I can expect that public support would be provided to certain sectors, for example, tourism sector or other sectors. It depends on the economy and on the country, and we don't have such detailed questions in our entrepreneurial framework conditions. So we don't touch sectors. Yeah, so that's in my opinion, what we did with the policy impact report is sort of a step further, steps sort of qualitative insight into how public policy deals with the problem called COVID, and we would have to dig even deeper and to answer such questions, and maybe introduce some changes into our survey tools. We do it from time to time, like through at least my 10-year experience in GEM. Our survey tools have been changed to accommodate new questions, but yeah, it's sort of open question, and I see the need for that. Yeah.
Thanks, Anna. We have a last question, but I mean, I think how can developing countries like India try to help the budding and existing entrepreneurs? And one of the things that I can say about that is that, well, it isn't only because COVID-19 kicked in that GEM can't offer India and Indian policymakers some guidance on how that India as a developing country can help entrepreneurs. So we have a GEM India team. In the report, you'll find a section and part 3 on India. And also, take some time maybe to look at GEM India on our website, and you'll get quite a lot of advice there. I think, yes, the developing countries may not be able to leapfrog like others that have more resources, but it may be an incremental process where you take opportunities as they come in and come by. So I'd end the questioning there because we have to phase out. I'd like maybe to just wrap up, Forrest, if you wouldn't mind putting up just to basically say to you that we had great pleasure in having you today to this webinar. If you're out there and you're curious about GEM, think about starting a national team in your country. If there's a gap there, we're always looking for new teams. It greatly improves our research. It creates resilience in the research, and we are very interested. We did have one query about Africa, and particularly in Africa, that's where we really need to beef up on teams. So if you're from Africa or are connected with Africa, bear that in mind. And one of the things that we are doing is developing a product on ecosystems and ecosystem surveys, entrepreneurial ecosystem surveys. And This really brings entrepreneurial ecosystems to the local level. So if you're interested in that, you'll find out more on the website. And of course, we're always interested in value-adding sponsorships and partnerships that will help GEM move forward. One of the great things about GEM is that it's always been relevant. Where COVID-19 is concerned, probably GEM has become more relevant than ever. And with that, I'll leave you for today. And Lisa, I hope your roller coaster calms down. Thank you very much to you and Niels and also Anna, and enjoy reading the report. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.